Ministers have pledged to fight corruption. In Yemen, at least one person has died in clashes with government loyalists. 52 protesters were wounded in Ibs city, 190 kilometers south of the capital, Sana'a. And another member of parliament has resigned from the ruling party, the 14th in the past week. Sheikh Hassan Ali Anan quit in protest at the government's treatment of protesters. Saudi Arabia is reported to be building up its security forces in the east. It comes in response to protests there calling for more rights for Shia Muslims. New video posted on social media websites appear to show a protest in Qatif on Friday. A report in the British Independent newspaper says up to 10,000 extra troops are being sent to the region. Saudi Arabia's ruling family wants to avoid scenes like those in neighboring Bahrain. There, Shias have been holding mass rallies against the Sunni royal family. Protesters have been camped out at Pearl Roundabout since last month, and they've won only minor concessions. On Sunday, hundreds took their campaign to Gudaibiya Palace, that's the Prime Minister's residence. Our correspondent in Bahrain, who we are not naming for his safety, has sent this report.
Calling for the overthrow of Bahrain's ruler, King Hamad. They're headed for Pearl Roundabout. It's been occupied by pro-democracy protesters for nearly 3 weeks. Shia opposition figures say that after years of repression and the killing of 7 protesters last month, it's time for change. Sunday started with a demonstration outside the palace where weekly cabinet meetings happen. Sunni and Shia leaders denounced the Prime Minister, the King's uncle, who's been in power for over 4 decades. And they called for foreigners given jobs in the security forces to be expelled from the country, saying the majority Shia population here is being squeezed out of public sector jobs. Hours later, the government reiterated people's right to freedom of expression, but everyone's waiting to see if they offer real concessions.
The government is they've called for a dialogue with opposition parties and most of civic society to reach some sort of a compromise towards, some sort of a constitutional democracy.
The previous announcement of 20,000 new government jobs has done nothing to quell the anger on the streets. What's not clear is how long the protests will continue and whether the security forces will continue to keep their distance. AlJazeera, Manama.
Tens of thousands of migrant workers have fled from Libya, but these Ghanaian workers say they're stranded after escaping across the border into Tunisia. Their stories coming up. Plus, the surge of support for the far right in France spells bad news for President Sarkozy.
Rhythms of resistance.
A part of the struggle, and popular resistance is art. Through my art, I resist. Resistance is my art, and my art is my war.
Musicians using music as a way to maintain their cultural identity.
I believe that when I sing to the world, I portray Palestine through my voice, my singing, and my songs.
Songs from the lost homeland. At this time, on AlJazeera.
Leaders are remembered, be they loved or feared. Alone they are inscribed on the pages of history. But what of the men and women whose hands build their monuments and whose blood stains their battlefields? The people who, against all odds, wield the power to reshape history. People in power at this time on AlJazeera.
Welcome back. The top stories on Al Jazeera. Libyan state television has broadcast an appearance by Muammar Gaddafi before crowds in Tripoli's Green Square. Pro-government supporters have been rallying in the capital on Sunday. Well, the rebel forces say they're advancing on Tripoli. They've held key oil terminals like this one at Ras Lanuf on Sunday. Some are calling on the international community to stage targeted air attacks on Muammar Gaddafi. Security forces in Cairo have broken up a crowd of protesters who were trying to get access to the Ministry of Interior. Men in plain clothes armed with knives, petrol bombs and bricks also clashed with protesters. OK, so with more in Libya and the fighting across the country on Sunday, here's Charles Stratford.
Another defiant wave to his supporters in Tripoli. Muammar Gaddafi appears on Libyan state TV. No explanation was given as to why his appearance was so brief. The propaganda battle continues to shroud verifiable facts on the ground when media access remains limited in so many areas. These are the latest pictures obtained by AlJazeera taken in the town of Misrata. They appear to show dead pro-Gaddafi fighters. A foreign ministry spokesman claimed local pro-Gaddafi groups were supporting the military in Misrata, a town some 100 kilometers east of Tripoli that it earlier claimed had been recaptured from the opposition rebels.
One of the brigades took the repositioned and didn't want to engage in the fighting. And despite that, the locals managed to capture 37 of the militia groups. In Zawiya, the situation is still as yesterday. The city is under control. There are few people who are taking human shields in some houses and flats and using their own families as a human shield. And this issue is left to the locals to resolve it. The army took a decision not to attack those flats and houses.
Evidence of heavy fighting in Misrata is all too clear. These pictures appear to show anti-Gaddafi fighters celebrating on tanks they say they've captured. But a member of the Civil Committee for Misrata Affairs described the situation on the ground as desperate, and he called for international action.
A no-fly zone is long overdue, and selective surgical strikes, I think, are called for.
An opposition spokesman denied his forces were losing control of towns they said they had captured.
In a statement to the Libyan people, the revolutionary forces confirmed that they are still in control of the areas that have been liberated. And what has been broadcast on the channels is incorrect and is not true on the ground. And you journalists have confirmed yourselves that we are in full control of the areas we have liberated.
No matter the claims and counterclaims by both sides, the casualties continue to rise. This is the local hospital in Ras Lanuf. Opposition forces were forced to retreat here after heavy fighting for control of Bin Jawad on the road to Gaddafi's hometown and stronghold of Sirte. Whether either side is making as much ground as it claims still remains very unclear, but it seems the propaganda mirrors the fighting. Libya is a divided country, and both sides are telling very different stories. Charles Stratford, Al Jazeera.
Well, as you heard in that report, calls for within Libya for international action are growing. But a senior U.S. senator has warned